The 1930s in Anglo-Australian cricket spells, unfortunately, Bodyline and the MCC Tour of Australia of 1932-3, when the captain, Douglas Jardine's tactics were so named. I say unfortunately because these tactics led both to dangerous play and dangerous ill-feeling. And they were never repeated, except that is for just one occasion. R.E.S. Wyatt, Bob Wyatt, was vice-captain on that tour. Here he is, followed by Harold Larwood, whose fast bowling, of course, made Bodyline so effective.
Personally, I never liked the expression bodyline bowling, but I suppose it can be described as fast leg theory, with the ball dropped short occasionally, and so short that it rises shoulder high or probably the head of the batsman, which of course is very unpleasant for the batsman. Instead of finding himself defending his wicket, he frequently has to defend his body. Well, it was discussed during the voyage and of course during the early matches. The problem did face us how to get Bradman out, and then it was quite obvious to us when we did try that Bradman didn't like it, and that was one of the reasons I suppose it was pursued with. He didn't play very well. He drew away, he didn't like it, and didn't cope with it very well.
Bradman was the danger. We knew that when we left England, because the season previously he'd absolutely murdered us in England. He took 338, I think, at Leeds, something like that, on a docile wicket. And then when we played the last match at, I think it was the Oval, I saw him definitely flinching. Whereas the other lad, the other end, Archie Jackson, a dear old friend of mine, he's passed away, he never flinched at all. But Bradman did definitely show signs of distress at the short ball.
Having seen Bradman and Jackson batting in that 1930 test at the Oval, when, after rain, Larwood made the ball fly, I would rather say that whereas both batsmen were hit frequently, as Wisden records, and Jackson stood his ground, Bradman tried to keep out of trouble by using his exceptional speed of reaction and footwork to move one side or other of the line of flight. It didn't occur to me he was scared, but Larwood could see the whites of his eyes, and we in the pavilion couldn't. Anyway, this piece of cricket was important in that 2 or 3 key figures thought they had found a chink in the Don's armour in handling the short fast bowling. By the way, he had made 232 in this Oval innings before he was given out, caught behind by Duckworth on a solitary appeal from mid-on, by all accounts a bad decision. And that was the first time in 8 test matches that Larwood captured his wicket. We come now to the view always maintained by Cubby, now Sir George Allen, who played in all those tests of 1932-3, and who also bowled fast, and with success, but using an orthodox field. He raised the moral issue, which was really at the heart of the matter, of the right way to play cricket.
I didn't think it was the right way to play cricket. You see, what strokes the batsman left with? They packed the leg side field and they bowled at the leg stump to stop it. That was leg theory. It was when they altered the line gradually. It was in the second innings of the second test match, which in my opinion, a body line really developed. I don't think it was planned. Douglas was a very determined man. He was a very sensitive man. And on the tour he'd been there 4 years before, he used to wear that rather coloured, highly coloured harlequin cap, and they used to get at him a bit. And he never really quite got over that. He didn't hate Australians. I don't accept that at all. He was a very determined man, very determined to win.
Bradman, Australia's national hero, was not fit and so missed the first test, won easily by England. But he came into the Australian side for the second test on the great brimming bowl of Melbourne. And he came in to face Bill Bowes of Yorkshire, the third string of the Bodyline battery after Larwood and Verse.
I was bowling when he came in, and as usual, the ground was absolutely packed. And I remember Badman to the cheers. He walked in a huge semicircle from the pavilion out to the wickets to get his eyes accustomed to the light. He took his guard and the cheering continued, and I waited at my bowling mark. When the cheering died away, Badman came up, took his stance. I moved in to bowl, and as I ran up to bowl, this cheering broke out again. Badman turned away from the wickets. We had to wait for, probably 40, 50 seconds for the cheering to die down. And for something to do, I don't think for any other reason, I said to my mid-on, "Oh, well, go up short just for the first ball or two." And he moved up close. When the cheering died down, I started off. It broke again, and again Badman turned from the stumps. And I think this time for something to do, I said to my fine leg fieldsman, "We'll move him round square." And I saw Badman look at my short leg. I saw him look at this man right away down, and I knew that he expected me to bowl a bouncer. Well, I thought if I could only complete this illusion, and I pulled an awful face as I ran up, as if I was going to dig it in as hard as I could, and certainly I bowled it short of good length, and instead of the ball bouncing, it kept about half stump high. Had it bounced, I think Badman would have hit the ball that had been going yet. He turned for the pull stroke, as if the ball was going to be about shoulder high. Found it was only about half stump high, and changed his shot magnificently. He got the faintest of tickles on the ball. I don't think he diverted it an inch, and it bowled him out. And there was a dead silence on that Melbourne ground. You could hear the trams rumbling over the points about a couple of miles away. A stunned silence. The only movement was Jardine, the usually sphinx-like figure that we had. He had his hands above his head, and he was going down doing a sort of Indian war dance in his extreme delight.
What a splendid piece of first-hand reporting. Bose, in fact, became a sports journalist, and the Australian Jack Fingleton was already one when he tells us how, going in first for Australia, he tried to counter Larwood by baiting him.
This was very cheeky, and a lot of chaps in the Australian side didn't think much of it. But I thought that if I could get Harold Larwood to lose his temper, I might have stood a better chance. So when Harold bowled one a little short, I walked at least halfway down the wicket, and I patted it. Well, I could see Harold glaring at me, and he let fly. Then, for about 2 overs, he did his best to hit me, to get a little of his own back. Fair enough, I'd been stupid. Well, now, my reasoning behind that was this, that if I could get Harold Larwood to drop them short, I was not in any great danger being bowled with the new ball. And believe me, Harold Larwood with the new ball was really magnificent. He could send them both ways in the air and brought back a beauty from the off stump. Well, now, I thought all I had to do then was duck. And I did duck successfully. He didn't hit me. But I don't think any other Australian thought much of those tactics. They worked out as far as I was concerned. I think I top scored for Australia that day.
Fingleton now moves on to events in the third test at Adelaide, when, with the ball flying around the batsmen's chests and ears, the atmosphere was, in Wisden's words, a disgrace to cricket, and the match, quote, probably the most unpleasant ever played, unquote. He tells of the blow that felled Woodfull, Australia's captain, and the aftermath.
A number of us had been hit. The feeling was very intense, and Billy Woodfull had been hit a very nasty blow over the heart by Harold Larwood. Now, to be hit by any fast bowler over the heart is not a very pleasant experience. But a chap as fast as Harold Larwood, it was a thickening thud of a blow, and everybody felt sick for Woodfull. But Douglas, who was so relentless in his outlook and things, he meant to win this test series, immediately ordered a stronger leg side field, which incensed everybody.
Not only was everyone incensed, but those Australians who were disinclined to believe that an England team would descend to unsporting tactics changed their view. When Woodfull was hit, Larwood was bowling to an orthodox field. offside that is. When, after some minutes, Woodfull was able to carry on, Jardine ostentatiously moved everyone across to the leg side, bodyline field. If that was not blatant intimidation, what was? From that moment, the authorities feared that if Bradman himself were hit, the crowd might well jump the pickets and assault the England players. To guard against this, a large detachment of mounted police were held in reserve behind the pavilion, while the England team had worked out a battle formation using the 6 stumps with Jardine and Larwood in the middle. So we come logically now to the assessment by Don Bradman, the man responsible for its invention, of the problems created for the batsman by bodyline. He tells how he tried to counter it. He says with no great success. But success is a relative commodity. Don averaged 56 in this test series, 14 more than the next Australian, and more than any Englishman playing an equal number of innings.
Well, when you've got 7 men on the leg side and you add to the 7 men the wicketkeeper and the bowler, which really makes 9, there's not much use trying to hit the ball on the onside. You can't score runs very effectively. You've got a great chance of getting out. So there's no future in it. So the only thing that I did was to try and counter it by moving towards the leg side, which technically, of course, is completely wrong, and trying to hit the ball onto the offside where there were no fieldsmen. This was a difficult thing, and contrary to what most people say, unfortunately, this exposed me to very much greater physical danger, because anyone who knows anything about fast bowling knows that the easiest way not to get hit is to get inside the line of the ball. But if you back away from it, you're getting into it. I'm afraid I didn't make a very great success of it because it was a pretty impossible job, and frankly, there was no real counter to it.
Eddie Painter of Lancashire tells how he saw the bodyline picture from his fielding position when he was the only man on the offside. Sometimes there was 1, sometimes 2.
He used to set this leg side field, you see, with one man on the offside, which was me. And I had very little chasing to do because it was all going into the batsman, you see. And it was going head high nearly all the time, you know, with bounce, you know. I remember at the match at Adelaide, when the Shimozzle started about the MCC and the Australian Board of Control, when he hit Billy Woodfull. Well, it wasn't Larwood's fault at all. He bowled a good length ball, and Billy ducked into it, expected a bouncy. Well, they hit him right under the arc, you see. And Harold swears today, you can ask Harold Larwood, he swears today that he were plumb. He'd have knocked his middle stump clean out. They appealed for LBW, but they got it turned down. And then later in the match, Bertie Oldfield tried to one that hit him in the face. Well, you know what the crowds are like in Australia. He used so-and-so, so-and-so. And, anyhow, we got out of that one.
As Eddie puts it, they got out of that one. A pleasanter interlude now, as he tells how in the 4th test at Brisbane, he came out of hospital to England's rescue.
On the Monday morning, I wasn't too well again, and of the advice of the specialist, I got to stay in bed, and on no occasion should I go to the ground at all. Fortunately, Bill Vos came, and we had a wireless set in our bedroom, and as the wickets was falling, Bill says, "What about it, Eddie?" So anyhow, I decided, I says, get my dressing gown and get a taxi and we'll go. And as the sister saw us leave, she played Harry with us and said, like, it was her own responsibility if we went. Anyhow, we went to the ground, and when the skipper saw me, he said, "Well, thank you, Eddie, and you better get your pads on," and so on. So I got my pads on, and Gubby Allen got out, and I had to go straight in, so that was all right for me because I had no waiting at all. Anyhow, I went in, and after an hour's play, the close of play on that day, I was 24 not out. Well, I went straight back to hospital, and the following morning I felt a little bit better, And I went to the ground again and had the fortunate part of it to make a score of 83.
The fortunate part of it. Good Lancashire modesty. Now Larwood gives us a glimpse of a moment of tension in the dressing room, which had a happy outcome.
Jardine came down and they looked at the four of us. He says, put your pads on. There's Les Ames, Marcel and myself, and just get the other one. And we sat down there having a cool glass of beer, and at 5 minutes of 6 there was a terrific roar outside, and of course we knew what had happened. There was a wicket down. So the skipper came down, he looked at the four of us, he says, right to Harold, he says, you're going. Well, I was furious, Bram, because I'd bowled a day and a half. I just took everything off, had a good shower and just relaxing as I was having to go into bed. So anyway, I went in, I said to Les Ames, I said, well, if you'll follow me, Les, I said, you can pick your bat up, I'm going to get out. Well, about the first ball I hit to cover point, and Bradman was feeling there. And I said, come on, Wally. Wally Hammond to the other end. He said, no, go back. I said, come on. Well, we're both straddling the middle of the wicket, and Bradman, for the first time in his life, threw a wild ball at the bowler's end and went for 4 overthrows, and that was it. That was a close of play, 5 not out. Well, next morning, I was walking out on the middle and with Wally, and Wally said, now, Lol, he said, just take your stall out. He said, you'll get some runs here today. Well, about 3:30, I got out, and when I got out, the Jardine just come and slapped me on the back, and he said, you're little so-and-so. He said, I knew you could play.
What Harold omitted to add was that he made 98, and that he was out 2 off his 100 to a good catch by Ironmonger, a clumsy old bowler who never caught anything. Witnesses now for the defence. Sutcliffe answering a query about England's tactics, then Bilvers, Larwood's bowling partner for Notts in England, and finally, and briefly, Douglas Jardine defines what he saw as the proper definition of cricket.
I thought they were first class. I did. I thought they were first class. I thought the Australians made too much of it. And I thought their tactics were absolutely wrong. You take Woodfull, he was any short ball, he went down on his hands and knees to allow the ball to go over the top. And I said he was hit on the backside several times, and we appealed for LBW. So there you are. And I know Jardine got a raw deal the whole tour, and so did Harold Larwood for his bodyline bowling.
I think that it was just a newspaper chap that brought this new name out for short of the length bowling. It's always been bowled, and it always will be. I think the main people, the target for this bodyline bowling is the people that's fast-footed and won't make a shot on these good wickets.
Well, I have just this to say about a game which I think is a peculiarly English heritage. A definition of cricket which has always struck me as being the only worthy definition of cricket. It was described as this by a New Zealander when he said it was their beautiful, beautiful game that is battle and service and sport and art.
To sum up, I would only add this. So long as the MCC team were in Australia, they were to a man loyal to Jardine, whatever their personal views about bodyline. In fact, when they got home, those 3 men, Sutcliffe, Larwood and Vos, were the only ones who were not in some degree critical. And some were very critical, not least Jack Hobbs, who was in Australia writing for the London evening paper, The Star. The West Indies came to England the following summer of 1933, and at Old Trafford we saw the one exhibition of bodyline to which I referred earlier, by Martindale and Constantine.
Now, we were told beforehand that there were some members of a committee of MCC coming to watch that match, and they wanted to see what bodyline was like in order to pronounce on it. I protested to our captain that Old Trafford wasn't the place to bowl bodyline. Old Trafford had about the deadest wicket in the country, and you wanted a wicket that was a little lively to approximate to what Australia was like before you bowled bodyline. Nevertheless, we bowled bodyline at Old Trafford. Jardine made 100, and I was insisting that Jardine should not be bowled bodyline. We should get him out in other ways. But our captain wouldn't have it. Jardine was the captain in 32. He should have a taste of it in 33. He made a century. He had the last laugh. At Old Trafford he had. But when we went to Lord's, on the more lively wicket, the batsmen didn't laugh so much. Lord's was lively in those days.
Jardine made a brave 100. But despite the slow pitch, unsuited to bodyline, Hammond had his chin cut open, and the general view was highly unfavourable. A year later, in 1934, the Australians were due again in England, and after a lengthy exchange of cables they came. At the outset of the tour, their captain, Billy Woodfull, always a highly respected figure in England, had this to say at the function which the British Sportsmen's Club held, and still do, in honour of visiting teams.
I may add that the players of this side were never in doubt as to the reception we would receive in the homeland. But it is fitting, after a period of over 50 years, contests between England and Australia, that at this stage the scores should be level. And we, in the Commonwealth of Australia, are rather proud of our achievements against the motherland, not only in our matches at home, but also in our matches on our own cricket fields. As Viscount Hailton has mentioned a moment ago, since I had the honour of replying to this post 4 years ago, many great sportsmen have passed to greener fields. Lord Harris, Lord Plumer, Ramsay himself, Johnny Douglas, Jack Blackham, and one of our own colleagues of the 1930 team, Archie Jackson. These gentlemen, and many others of course, will live long in the annals of sport, and also many of them in more momentous spheres than that. We shall miss them greatly.
Let me now introduce a key figure in the cricket of the 30s of a different kind. Howard Marshall was the father of cricket broadcasting, and he first operated in the Lord's Test of 1934 against Australia. That was the famous match when, after a thunderstorm on the Sunday night, Hedley Verity had a sticky wicket to bowl on. He took 15 wickets in the day, and he had taken 14 of them when Howard began this commentary.
Well, now the Australian total is 117 for 9 wickets. A very desperate position for Australia. They are surviving rather longer than we expected, as a matter of fact, after that sudden collapse between 5 and a quarter past when 4 wickets fell, 4 good wickets. Here comes Verity bowling to O'Reilly. O'Reilly this time wasn't quite so sure. He played rather a half-cock shot and it went off the edge to George Geary, fielding at a sort of backward point, rather deep. Now Verity is going back, preparing to bowl. Here he comes, O'Reilly facing him. Verity bowls, O'Reilly with the straightest of straight bats, plays Verity towards mid-on, but mid-on is very deep indeed, and they get one comfortable run. And now Wall faces the bowling, and we rather wonder whether either Hammond or Geary or Sutcliffe, 3 slips very close in, may not snatch a catch. off the edge. Here comes Verite, bowling to Wall. Oh, he's out. That's the end of the match. The players are pulling out the stumps. Wall played very gently, and Patsy Hendren at silly point took the catch, and Australia are all out for 118. That is, if my arithmetic isn't too bad, they are beaten by an innings and 38 runs. The crowd is simply swarming onto the ground from all sides. The players have pulled up the stumps for souvenirs. The Australians are walking back, and the police are trying to keep a line clear for the players to escape into the pavilion. They're racing in. The crowd are swarming round the pavilion gates there.
Now this will give special pleasure, I'm sure, to listeners in Yorkshire. Maurice Leyland tells us about his first sight of young Len Hutton.
We've got a window shed with 2 nets in, and George used to the coach, and how it's nearly impossible for one man to look after 2 nets. So what George used to do was to ask 1 or 2 of the first teamers if they'd look after the other net for him, you see. And he came to me one day, he said, there's a boy going into that net, Maurice. I wish you'd help him if you can. Just watch him. And he had 3 bowls at him for about a quarter of an hour. Well, for a quarter of an hour, Len batted beautifully against them. And I never said a word to him. His technique, to my mind, was pretty perfect. Just a little bit short of strength. When he came out of the net, George said, "What do you think to him, Maurice?" I said, "Well, George, I couldn't tell him anything." He said, "I'm very pleased you've said that, because I couldn't."
A few days after his 21st birthday, Len played for England for the first time. In August 1938, as a 22-year-old, he made history at the Oval. Here, at the end of the second day of this test against Australia, when his score was exactly 300 not out, he talks modestly about his innings so far.
8 years ago, when I was 14 years of age, I watched Don Bradman play his wonderful innings at Leeds of 334, and I little realized that 8 years later I should probably have a chance to beat his fine score. Today I was very fortunate to beat 2 records, scoring more than any England batsman has ever done against Australia in England, and beating the record which Mr. Foster held many years ago. As I sit here looking over the Oval, everything looking so peaceful, well, there are a few people about, but not very many, all the newspapers and things, and I'm looking forward to a good night's rest, so that tomorrow I might be able to carry on with the good work.
And here's Howard Marshall coming to the great moment when the record is broken.
Here comes Fleetwood Smith running up to bowl. He bowls to Hutton, a short one. Hutton forces it past Silimidoff, where Bradman's fielding, but not Bradman. It is Bradman, crouching at Silimidoff, of course. Difficult to see in this brilliant sunlight with the big peaks on their caps throw dark shadows over their faces. Now here's Fleetwood Smith again to Hutton. Hutton hits him. Oh, beautiful stroke. There's the record. Well, that was the most lovely stroke. A late cut off Fleetwood Smith's leg break, which absolutely flashed to the boundary for 4 runs to give Hutton the record, beating Bradman's record made at Leeds in 1930 of 334, beating that record for the highest score ever made by an individual in test matches in this country. Not in this country, but between England and Australia ever. And equaling Hammond's record in test matches of any kind, made at Auckland in 1933. They're singing. Terrific reception, the whole crowd standing up and cheering all around the ground, thousands of them all standing up. Bradman's been rushed over to shake Hutton by the hand. The whole Australian team have congratulated him, and now everybody cheering. Oh, it really is a wonderful scene, this. Here in this brilliant sunshine, they won't stop cheering.
History made. I have one abiding memory of that occasion. The BBC commentary point was a small green box perched on top of the ladies' stand, at the long leg angle it was, and one had to get to it by means of a lengthy ladder at the back. Soon after Len got out for 364, he and I went up that ladder one by one, he for another interview, I to do a summary of it all for what was then the Empire Service, now, of course, the World Service. Len still had on his batting trousers, and I well recall they were grey with the dust of Kennington after his 13 hours, 20 minutes of dedicated toil. A year later, when Howard Marshall, Michael Standing and I gave a ball-by-ball commentary of the Oval Test against the West Indies, the BBC had been promoted to a little room in the pavilion. It was, of course, 7 years later, the war over, before we could use that room again.